Our story begins as the clock ticks to midnight. A green haze fills in the atmosphere. The puddles of water on the ground turn crimson like blood, and the pedestrians on the street transmogrify into coffin-shaped crystals. The protagonist, immune to these strange events, looks out to the disturbing sight and simply exhales. Why is he so apathetic to his surroundings? Maybe he's used to seeing death everywhere he goes. Death is not a hunter unbeknownst to its prey. One is always aware that it lies in wait. Though life is merely a journey to the grave, it must not be undertaken without hope. Only then will a traveler's story live on, treasured by those who bid him farewell. This is the theme of Persona 3 for the PlayStation 2, or as the game more succinctly puts it, memento mori, remember that you are mortal. A game completely centered around the question of how we react in the face of death, where we continually move forward in time, unable to turn the calendar back to make different choices, constantly and always moving closer to the eventual end we will all one day face. Even though it's getting close to being a game that's well over 15 years old, Persona 3 still rocks. I can't tell you for certain if this is my favorite PS2 game, or even my favorite Persona game, but I can say for sure that this is one of my favorite games of all time. Before we properly discuss today's game in question, I do briefly want to highlight the game's development context. Knowing the conditions that this game was made under helps shed light on exactly how the series became an eventual trendsetter. The PS2 era for Megami Tensei was arguably the series' golden age. There was just one problem. Atlus's bank vaults looked like this during that time. With the company going through quite a lot of financial troubles, Persona 3 was essentially made on a shoestring budget. When given extended thought, this puts the entire structure of the game into context, and it's possibly because of these financial limitations that informed many creative decisions that made Persona so iconic. Without the money for a globe-trotting adventure, placing the game in a small city was an efficient way to reuse the same few dozen rooms every single day. Without the money to make diverse locations, it was a more efficient use of resources to have players revisit a centralized random dungeon for the primary bulk of their game time. And to spread their small amount of content over as many hours as possible, key story moments would be set at contextually sensible intervals, forcing players to spend more time in the world, and appearing to get a more valuable experience for their purchase. But to make sure that players wouldn't get bored, there could be smaller, lower stakes story content to engage with in the meantime. Perhaps the order at which it was completed could be influenced by player choice so the game wouldn't become repetitive. This might not have been the exact mindset of the creative team when creating Persona 3, but I think at least some of my inferences are probably what they were thinking about. I think that a Persona 3 where the team had a development budget that was more in line with what Atlus would have normally provided would have turned into an entirely different game. One that I'm not sure would have emotionally resonated with people as strongly. But they also pulled it off so well that they could have just been mad geniuses to begin with. And it really speaks to the quality of a design choice where it's this chicken or egg scenario. You are a 16-year-old Japanese high school student who goes by the canon name of Roger. Recently transferred to Gekkoukan High School in the city of Iwatodai, you are to live out the next year of your life as best you can. Within the opening hour, you're given a brief tour of your school, your dorm, and introduced to the strange phenomena occurring across the island. From here, you're given a normal life and asked to balance your time between academics, training, and social obligations. And that is a balance you have to decide for yourself as a player. Persona 3 implemented an incredibly unique framing device for its narrative. The year I described isn't an arbitrary time frame dictated by the story. The entire game takes place across a calendar year. Everything you do takes time, and when all your time is spent, the day advances. While the calendar system would be used in future games as well, it is most appropriately used in this game. The gameplay loop establishes very early on that every major story event will take place during a full moon. Your goal is to make use of the time you have before the eventual day of calamity. In short little bursts, the story is reminding you of the eventual inevitabilities we face, and in the long term, the game sells that as well. A whole year seems like a lot of time, especially as a teenager. That's more than enough time to 100% complete an entire JRPG. Until suddenly, the year turns into months, then weeks, and with only days remaining, you'll question if you really made the best use of your time. Don't freak out too much. Even if you play suboptimally, you're probably not going to softlock yourself. It takes consistently being unwise with your time to get a broken save file. But as long as you're doing anything with your time, you're always progressing. Social life makes combat easier. Hanging out with your friends will boost the power you get from fusing new personas. Creating unbreakable bonds will even unlock access to the personas with the highest base stats and strongest battle skills. So you're going to want to max out every relationship you can. It's a small shame you won't be able to max out everyone though. Now, it is possible to do everything within a single cycle from a fresh new game save file. It's an incredibly strict challenge, but yes, you technically can. Although if I can make a plea to you, resist the temptation. Just follow your instincts. You're not going to be able to do everything you want. Sometimes you'll even mess up. That's okay, because that's just how life is. If you feel anxiety that you're not doing everything you possibly can with the time you have, then it sounds like you're well on your way to understanding the theme. This game is too engrossing to let a guide play it for you. Arguably, the thing you'll spend the most time trying to cultivate during your playthrough in a Persona game are the various bonds of friendship that you form. The game nicely calls these your social links. While there are gameplay benefits to pursuing as many social links as possible, I've always sought after them specifically for the individual stories. As this game loves to use imagery related to death, most of the social links in this game revolve around the concept of death. But an additional piece of context I want to provide is that death in terms of the Tarot Arcana does not always mean a literal loss of life. Death could also refer to a change in life circumstances with no possible reversal. If you play Persona 3 or are looking to replay Persona 3, I encourage you keep that theme in the back of your mind while participating. I really don't want to run through every social link, partly because I wasn't able to finish all of them, partly because that only serves to deprive others of the experience, partly because some of them are kind of boring. But you should probably know that while Persona 3 has more than a few duds, the vast majority of them feature some of the most interesting characters and perspectives in the series. I even like a lot of the ones that people commonly dislike. It definitely comes off as their first attempt doing something like this. The narrative pacing of them does feel a little bit odd. They are easily the shortest conversations in the series. Most times you only have one dialogue option during the scene. Later games would make their social links feel at least somewhat more like an actual conversation between the protagonist and the character. But why Persona 3 still has my favorite iteration of the social link system is that there's a few underlying mechanics that add a bit of challenge to the mix. Social links can be reversed. You won't be able to resume a social link's progress until you spend time with that person to apologize and patch up the relationship. If you further hurt that person's feelings during the patch-up, then the social link will break, and you will never be able to progress it for the rest of the playthrough. This sounds extreme, but really it's as simple as not being an asshole, and this should never be a problem. There are 3 ways a social link can be reversed. The first 2 are fairly self-explanatory. If you pick options during a conversation where you're antagonistic or inconsiderate of the person's feelings, they will get upset and reverse the social link. The second way is by canceling plans you've made and hanging out with someone else. The third way is admittedly kind of a beginner's trap. If you don't hang out with a social link within 60 days of the last meeting, the social link will automatically reverse. The other 2 methods are detrimental, but I think most people will generally be able to accept them, and the game will provide you the feedback to know you're doing something wrong. But for the inactivity requirement, the game makes no mention anywhere that this is a possibility that could happen. It's a completely obscure, unexplained facet of the social simulator part that provides no indication when it's about to or has already happened. This doesn't happen with every social link, just your friends at school. Like the old couple isn't going to be mad if it's been half a year since you last saw them. They understand. You're a busy guy. You don't have to waste your youth on seeing the elderly. But they give you a little snack as a thank you. Because they're wholesome. In fact, almost all the adult social links don't want you to see them. It's kind of wild. But this is also further compounded by the jealousy modifier. Relationships with female characters and intimacy are a bit different in Persona 3. If you get far enough into a social link with a female character, they will become your girlfriend without any input from you. While you're in a relationship with someone, every time you hang out with another female character, the counter before reversal is reduced by a random number of days. So yeah, Persona 3 does go a bit overboard. But here's why I will defend the inclusion of these systems, at least to a certain extent. It makes the world more believable. It makes the characters more believable. And most importantly, it makes the social simulator side of the game somewhat challenging. People won't permanently like you just because you're the protagonist. You can't just say whatever you want to people and expect them to become better friends with you. If one of your friends in real life canceled plans they had with you, it might make you a little bit upset. And even the ticking time bomb that is the automatic reversals add an extra layer of consideration. I can recognize that these challenges aren't well signposted to players as a possibility that can happen, or at least the advice that the game gives is a bit too vague to take seriously. Even still, I can't help but feel the gradual phasing out of reverse social links is a serious blow against the series. Gamers love challenges in video games. Unless that challenge is inconvenient. Then it's filler. Then it's padding. Then it's not their fault somehow. It's a case where an excellent idea was cast aside just because it was flawed. But that's fine. With the remake coming out, it can tweak these systems to be more palatable, introducing a new generation of fans to these intricate social simulator challenges. Well, hopefully. If players don't just save scum, as they're wont to do. Everything you can do during the daytime is to help you prepare for night. The dark hour is the only time when the shadows come out to play, so you best get ready for when that time comes. Persona 3 isn't like most other games. Instead of having a series of locations with different dungeon layouts to traverse, you'll instead go to the same dungeon almost every night. The dungeon is Tartarus. Its inhabitants are tasked with climbing a seemingly never-ending labyrinth. A desperate, monotonous struggle of finding the next flight of stairs before the guardian of the underworld sends you right back to the jaws of Hades. Tartarus is often seen as the worst aspect of Persona 3 as a video game. But the thing is, I've always loved Tartarus, and I've always seen it as a refreshing change of pace from almost all other RPG dungeons I've played. It is a 264 floor dungeon, which is completely randomly generated every time you go inside. However, each floor only takes a couple minutes to get through, sometimes even less. I think most people try to completely clear out a floor, getting all the chests and defeating all the enemies before moving on. But you don't need to. You have the freedom to make those micro decisions. If you're on a new block for the first time, you probably will want to scour every floor for all the equipment and money it's worth. After a few visits, you may then decide to split up the party to find the stairs as fast as possible, taking advantage of the higher EXP gains from fighting shadows alone. But that too is also a risk if you leave your weaknesses exposed. But I actually never found Tartarus to be that much of a slog. For one, Tartarus is only a nighttime activity. So unlike later games in the series, there isn't a choice between only doing the social links for a day or only doing the dungeons for the day. And since increasing social stats is pretty much the only other thing you can do at night anyway, little is sacrificed by going to Tartarus. But there's a secret little tip that vastly improves the exploration of Tartarus which no one wants you to know about, but I'll gladly tell ya.
You can leave Tartarus whenever you want.
You have approximately a month to train in Tartarus between full moons. That's more than plenty of time to get prepared. Just because there's an upper limit for how much time you can spend in Tartarus, you're not making a poor decision by leaving early. This game has a lot of flexibility. Don't get too hung up on optimization. I also feel like this criticism is mostly an extension of people coming from later games in the series and going back to Persona 3. In those games, it's encouraged to get through as much of a dungeon as possible within a visit. Some go as far as to complete the entire dungeon within the first day of availability. But those are games where your resources for getting through are finite. But in Persona 3, you theoretically have unlimited resources. Your HP and SP is fully refilled every time you go back to the lobby. So I feel as if people complain Tartarus is a slog, but fail to realize it's actually user error that contributes to the negative emotions people feel. Look inward, people. You're cringe. But I don't think it's the dungeoneering of Tartarus that is what ultimately upsets people. In fact, I wager your enjoyment of Persona 3 as a game is going to live or die by being able to accept how party management works in this game. A core concept the developers wanted to express with this game is separating yourself from the rest of your team. This was in an effort to emphasize that all the characters are unique individuals. Persona 3 lacks some conventional design choices you've probably taken for granted. It feels odd that I'm about to praise a game for lacking quality of life features, but if you find a good weapon or armor that would go really well on someone, you have to go up to them and hand it over. If the weapon is really nice, they'll be ecstatic. You just made their day. Makes the equipment feel like it actually exists within the universe. You might not always have all your options available. Not everyone plays to your schedule. Some of them will want to take breaks to study or have other responsibilities, so you might not have every party member join you for going to Tartarus. They might be too tired or sick. Hell, some nights you're not even allowed to go to Tartarus because Mitsuru or Fuka won't be around to support you. The practical challenge the designers wanted to answer here was to not have players only use the same party every time, but I actually really liked how this is framed in general. The world isn't making concessions for you simply because it's a video game, abiding by some arbitrary law that dictates you're supposed to have fun. Makes the world feel authentic. But beyond all of that is the humongous elephant in the room. You quite literally have to play this game differently than almost every other RPG you can find. Persona 3's party members are controlled by an AI, and there's no way for you to change this. You still have a say in what party members do. Tactics can be individually assigned to party members, which narrow the range of possible things they can do in a round of combat. Even then, it's not a guarantee. The AI, try as it might, is not the wisest decision maker. It's going to make some odd calls at times. But if the goal was to make everyone an individual, then this was probably the best way to do it. The system is unsurprisingly divisive. When Persona 3 received its portable version, the entire battle system was overhauled to more closely resemble the experience found in Persona 4. These changes were so impactful, some people would even suggest Persona 3 Portable is the only playable version of the game because of it. The future remake that comes out this year will only add perceived credence to this argument. I'm not going to claim that the AI party members were perfect. If they were, we wouldn't collectively remember Marin Karn as a universal meme. But I've grown to be less sympathetic to this debate over the years. People seem more offended by the idea they don't have a complete say in what a party member does, rather than how it actually works in the context of the game. Honestly, most of my problems with the system come in at the beginning of the game, where party members don't really have a lot of options to work with. The most useful tactics only come into play when you've made it somewhat substantially through the game. But I can dig this too. It emphasizes how much Roger is improving as a leader throughout the game. But wouldn't it be better to provide an option for players if they wanted to either opt in or out of the AI control, like in later games? Well, do we really deserve that option? If we were allowed to choose either AI or direct commands, realistically, how many people would even choose to use the AI at any point during the game? My guess would only be about 5% of players, if even that much. By not leaving that choice to the players, they have to play the experience the game dictates for them. They need to put themselves in a position where they can only give their teammates commands, and will have to put trust in them to fulfill their roles. And this is a decision that I respect full-heartedly. I truly felt like more of a leader during this game than any other RPG I've played. Maybe I'm gaslighting myself into believing this design choice is better than it actually is, but I don't know. I can't help but applaud a game that has the balls to ask how important a staple of the genre we take for granted is. Could there be potential for a more interesting experience if we force the players into a mindset that makes them think more dynamically than just doing the same thing that's been done since the 80s? There's a concept I like to call thematic design, where mechanics and design choices are placed in the game with the purpose of telling a story or building the world before player enjoyment or following genre conventions. Persona 3 is filled to the brim with this thematic design, and I think it's just the most raw game of the Persona series because of it. I don't want to keep spending this video throwing shade at the eventual remake of this game. Honestly, I hope it's good. I want people to fall in love with the same experience that I did back in 2016. I suppose a part of me is worried seeing the firm edges of the series being sanded down. Because maybe it shouldn't be a game's job to be fun. Maybe it should make you think. Maybe it should just provide a memorable experience. It's a shame to see the main advantage video games have as an art form gets rejected when its intention doesn't align with mainstream conventional game design. And if you're still going to complain to me that the AI party members ruin this game even if it is thematically appropriate, then shut up, dude. I bet you're the guy that complains about the time limit in Majora's Mask. I bet you're the guy that complains about items being expensive in Tales of Arise. I bet you're the guy that complains about the side missions in No More Heroes. I bet you're the guy that complains about saving being a resource in Resident Evil. I bet you're the guy that complains about Dark Souls not having an easy mode. I bet you're the guy that complains about half the things in Earthbound. I bet you're the guy that The Persona cast of main characters are all beloved for one reason or another. Everyone has their own favorites. For me, Persona 3's cast has been my favorite of the bunch ever since I played the game for myself. What I like about Persona 3 is that it's not afraid if you aren't the constant center of attention. It knows you don't have to be there for every single moment in the game. Dumb, stupid anime games have this problem where any and all character development or conflict resolution needs to take place while the protagonist is present. Because of that, it's incredibly rare when we get to see characters be themselves, or at least who they are when they don't have to bend over for the person holding the controller. Most of Persona 3's characters see significant growth while the protagonist is absent. A common sentiment that I've seen brought up numerous times over the years is that the main cast of Persona 3 don't really feel like friends. They certainly have a different vibe than the other games. Beyond that, they really don't spend all that much time together, at least not compared to the later groups in the series. But to insinuate that they don't feel like friends has always been a bit puzzling to me. They are friends. They don't get along 100%, and they're ready to call out behavior they don't like. They may not be exclusively tied to each other and go off to do their own things, but as they share experiences, are affected by the same tragedies, and spend time together, they don't feel like friends anymore. They feel like family. I do want to go ahead and give my thoughts on some of the individual characters, nothing absolutely crazy, but I think they're fun to discuss. You can tell a cast of characters is one of the highest quality when they're completely divisive and not universally loved. Case in point would be Yukari. Most of her detractors claim she's an unlikable petty bitch. Yeah, well, newsflash, buddy. So are you. There's sort of an interesting observation one could make when analyzing characters from this series. The more they're written realistically, like a human being, with flaws and shortcomings that people actually deal with, they become incredibly controversial characters. This is probably because Persona fans are historically known to not go outside and interact with real people. When I first played Persona 3, I honestly didn't think all that much of Yukari. I saw her as the girl character, but over the course of the game she gets a lot of development, easily the one character that's the most willing to just say what's on their mind. In another world, she probably could have been the protagonist of the game. Junpei is another interesting character. I might even say he's overall the most well-realized character in the game. He's a guy that thinks he's cooler than he actually is, or at the very least, that's what he wants to believe. But deep down, he knows that all he's really good for is fighting shadows. You have one thing that makes you special, but no one knows about it. No one would believe you if you told them. All the while you're fighting to once again become a normal person. I get it, man, that hurts. But Junpei is able to finally reach the natural endpoint of all our dreams by getting pussy. We respect the play. I actually grew to appreciate Mitsuru a lot more on this recent playthrough of mine. She has all the qualifications to be what is clearly the most popular girl. The valedictorian, the class president, stunningly beautiful, and super rich. It's hard to find someone more seemingly perfect than her. But despite being the most supposedly well put together and perfect girl, when things get tough or when the past comes back to haunt her, that's when the facade begins to break. Then this supporting character needs support from others. Oh, right, support. I forgot about Fuka. Listen, I can't just look at this cast and definitively say that one of them is my least favorite. I'm not heartless. But it's probably Fuka. I think the problem is that her growth only becomes really obvious pretty late into the game. It's also kind of odd because I feel like she's also the character that suffers the least from the events of the story. Which is a good thing, right? The ideal amount of suffering anyone should go through is 0. But I guess I didn't find all that much to appreciate in her, sadly. I don't hate her though. And oh boy, we have Ken, unquestionably the most hated character in the game. Well, the most hated party member at least. I guess most people would still take him over Moon Boy. In one of the most adult, mature games in the series, one of your party members is a literal child, an 11-year-old. A character who would be younger than I was in 2009. Ironically, he's also one of the most mature characters in the game. At least outwardly facing. Underneath it all, he harbors the darkest feelings and the most unresolved trauma. It's actually really scary. I think we sometimes forget how vengeful children can be. I know that a lot of people wouldn't want to be caught dead being a Ken defender, but I'll take that risk. His mother died, everyone is writing it off, but he knows something's up. And because he's young, he doesn't have the emotional maturity to really process there's more to life than what's immediately in front of him. I think a lot of people forget it's not a character's job to be impartially logical with every decision they make. And just because they say one thing, that doesn't always correlate with what they think. People aren't logical. They aren't robots. Segue to the party member that's a literal robot. I guess is a fun character, even if she's a bit predictable. What you see on the tin is pretty much what you'll get for about 95% of the time she's around. But by the end of the game, even the most inhuman character is able to change and create long-lasting bonds. It's neat. Aigis is arguably the most famous character from the game, even possibly eclipsing Roger. I suppose that's why she's the mascot of the game. Which is odd to say because that means the animal companion isn't. Frankly, I don't think there's much to say about Koromaru. He's just a dog. He can't exactly talk or anything. but I appreciate his presence. More JRPGs need a party member that's just a straight up dog. From a battle standpoint, I also think he's one of the more overlooked characters of the game. The boy gets Agidyne way before anyone else gets their third tier spells. No wonder Junpei is so self-conscious. Even the dog is better than him. Let's wrap this up with arguably the two most beloved characters in the game. Akihiko is an extremely beloved character to no one's surprise at all. When he's not breaking hearts and breaking faces, he's breaking text boxes. He's definitely going on a lot about training and other shonen business, but it's topped off with a healthy heaping of childhood traumas and not being strong enough to do anything because of a past failure. I also think he has a charismatic attitude that you can't help but appreciate. Akihiko's personal convictions also changed the first out of the main cast, which I do think contributes to a bit of favoritism. Shinjiro is a fan favorite for good reason. This guy is cool in the edgiest way possible. Skipping school, hanging out in dark alleys, doing drugs and wiping total randos. He never takes off that pea coat and beanie, even in the blistering heat of summer. Don't tell this guy to use heal support commands. He doesn't do that shit. Not to mention he's also a unique party member in the fact that he doesn't have any resistances or weaknesses, meaning he can find a place in almost any team lineup, a trait that no other playable party member in the series has. Now watch some actually guy tell me about a character from Persona 2. Go ahead, pal. Your comments only feed the algorithm. There's also another reason why he's a unique party member in the series.
This is how it should be.
When I first played Persona 3 back in 2016, Shinjiro's death wasn't actually all that powerful to me. My friend kinda spoiled the moment for me before I'd even touched Persona 3, and I'm a piss baby about spoilers. Even then, I really didn't see past the fiction and just interpreted this moment as a sequence in the story. But Shinjiro's death is framed as an unexpected and shocking moment for the party, and it seems like the vast majority of the audience felt the emotions that were intended here. The other sentiment I've heard sometimes is that others have a hard time feeling all that torn up about Shinji's death, as he's only around for about a month as a party member. Therefore, people didn't really feel like they had a lot of time to get to know him, which I do get if I'm being honest, because Shinji wasn't a character who could be seen from the earliest months of the game, helping the party from a distance. He didn't have any pre-established relationships with any other characters in the game. We don't get to learn about the regrets which inform the attitude he has in life, and we don't even get to see things he does outside of being a cool guy, like cooking for the rest of the crew or something. Maybe if we had a social link where we learned his favorite ice cream flavor and his one character trait that gets run into the ground, then I would have felt bad. But even to those people, the game has something to say. There's a lot of students who express indifference over Shinji's death. It's impossible for us to care about every single person that dies. We don't have the emotional capacity for it. But even if you don't know the person who died, there are others that did. So be mindful of them. Recognize that the person who can no longer live had an entire upbringing that culminated in their passing. Empathize with the people who now have to go on living without that someone to be there anymore. Content warning. The rest of the video contains anecdotes about personal experiences with death and existential thoughts. Viewer discretion is advised. I want to do this next part unscripted and just kind of speak from the heart, and if this segment doesn't really make sense or is just kind of me rambling on, doing something weirdly different for the sake of the video, please just bear with me if that's alright. The reason I wanted to play Persona 3 again, now of all time, I say now, I started the playthrough last year, but when I started the playthrough, to be honest, I don't want to go into that many specifics, partly to keep everyone's privacy of the situation intact, but also because someone died, but I didn't know them, but maybe I should have, and it left me in a kind of weird situation regarding their death, because I didn't have the emotional capacity and really the empathy to really help others through what they were going through at the time. And how could I be blamed for that in a way? Because I didn't know this person. And yet, I think I kind of made a mistake by, even after they passed away, not really doing anything to get to know them. And it's kind of strange to me looking back because I think I have a weirdly different relationship with death compared to many other people out in the world. Because I'm someone who's fortunate enough to have death not really have impacted them, like, much at all. The people who have been closest to me that have died have been my grandparents. And for maybe not the most tactful way of saying it, but they were people who were old, were gonna die sooner or later anyway, right? So, in a way, I think that made a lot of those deaths very easy to accept and grapple with, because that's the cycle of life. So whenever I heard tragic news of someone dying before their time, someone's father, mother, brother, sister, cousin, aunt, uncle, I've had a very difficult time relating to the people who go through those experiences because I have no idea what that's like. I can't even pretend to know. And because I've never really went through something like that before, I think that created a rather apathetic attitude towards death. I want to say that the way I coped with death within the last few years is just that death happens. It's a part of life. It'll happen to all of us, and sometimes it happens to some people earlier than others. Which I think for me, in the past few years, that worked. At this point, I don't think it's a healthy way of looking at death. I don't think it's a good way to cope, but nonetheless, it is the way I looked at the world. And now with a bit of hindsight, with a bit of reflection, I think I've begun to realize that I'm being way too apathetic about death. I'm not taking it seriously, and what's gonna happen one day when it does happen to someone I'm really close with? Am I gonna be apathetic about their death too? Which is exactly why I wanted to play Persona 3 again last year, and why I was hoping to take something away from the playthrough this game that I didn't really appreciate before at the time, or maybe I didn't know was there and didn't realize, and look past just the theming and the fiction and look towards what it actually means to me. So this is what I learned from my most recent playthrough of Persona 3.
When I first played Persona 3, I would have told you the narrative theme of the game was to not be afraid of death. Memento mori, remember that you are mortal. My life may one day expire, maybe sooner than I expect, but it's still important to stand tall and face it. Don't be afraid of death, because it's nothing to be afraid of. It's an easy lesson to digest for a 19-year-old that had yet to become phenomenally depressed. I've unfortunately had more encounters with death since then. If I was lucky, I had time to prepare for it, to start the grieving process while they were still around. Other times, I got a phone call on an average day. These experiences have made me more horrified with the reality of death. There was once a lady I worked with, probably about my mom's age. She was incredibly kind, always willing to teach me something about the job. She even gave me the leftovers from the snacks she didn't end up eating during lunch. Then when I clock into work one morning, I'm briefly pulled aside and told in a hushed tone that she suffered from a heart attack on the way home and died in a car crash. I saw the emergency vehicles go by the store that previous night while I was closing and thought nothing of it at the time. You always hear sirens every now and then. The news in the morning recontextualized them into a momentary interaction I sometimes think back to. Those were her sirens. I think that was the first time I had interacted with someone and had no idea it would be the last time I would talk to them. I never used to think about how I would eventually die. It's just one of those things I brushed off to the side. It'll just be a thing I'll worry about in 70 years. Until time starts passing exponentially faster every year. At this point, I probably only have a solid 50-ish years ahead of me. Do I really though? What if I get sick? What if I get into an accident? No matter what I do, there's always some chance of the danger I face. And the only way to really keep myself sane is to just not consider the possibility. And lately, it's getting harder not to consider it. Haven't I wanted to create a video game since I was 6 years old? It's been 20 years. What do I have to show for it? A couple unpublished maps I've generated in an RPG Maker, and design documents scratched into an old notebook from high school?
I'll start learning during summer break. I'll start learning after I take these low-level programming courses. I'll start learning after I graduate. How many times am I going to continually push my life backwards, moving the goalposts simply because existing in the current reality just makes me want to retreat? How long have I spent playing video games? Why is it what I spend my free time doing? Why is it the only thing I spend my free time doing? What happened to the Boy Scout who loved outdoors and camping? What happened to the kid that could swim for miles without breaking a sweat? When am I gonna get around to that stack of books on my end table? Use that library card I just renewed? Buy a train ticket and just go somewhere? Since when did I regress as a person? Why didn't I notice it? Why am I so behind in life? But that's what makes this game so special. Persona 3 is one of the most pervasively gloomy games out there. Every night comes a reminder of what awaits us. Time continually marches forward until an inevitable moment of disaster. More and more people begin to give up and drown themselves in apathy. And yet, this is also one of the most anti-nihilistic games I've ever played. Replaying this game again, I realized that Persona 3's central theme is actually a lot more optimistic than I realized. At its core is a game that directly encourages living life to the fullest. For a game that depicts teenagers shooting themselves in the head, it doesn't want to make that the highlight. Life isn't a constant stream of misery. There's probably more joy and whimsy in it than negativity. And simply by being there, by giving others just a little bit of your time, you can prop up their own lives. And when you're not around anymore, those smiles you gave them will be your legacy. Persona 3, when I first played it, taught me not to be afraid of death. Playing it again, I might have got the wrong message. Now I know that it's normal to be afraid of death. But that shouldn't be an excuse to give up hope. I think that's why Persona has found a meteoric rise in success ever since 3 released. These games inspire me to be a better person, and I think they inspired a lot of other people in the same way. So go out into the world, make friends, try a new hobby, rekindle old interests, talk to someone, be more knowledgeable, charming, and brave. That way, 50 years from now, or a year from now, or maybe even yesterday, I will face whatever comes next with a smile, knowing that I lived. And that is what I learned from one of the greatest video games ever made.